So we also have some folks joining us from Instagram live as well. So if you maybe haven't signed up for the program and you are on live, welcome. This is Menstrual Health Through the Five Senses. There's going to be 5 sessions of Menstrual Health Through the Five Senses, which is going to be a lot of fun each Sunday for the next 5 weeks. I'll be meeting with you at this time on Sunday to talk about different concepts related to the 5 senses and how we use body literacy to understand, the framework of what's going on with our body. So we're using the senses, and then we're trying to interpret what the senses are telling us in an organized way. And I do that through charting, but also through a lot of my other, artistic endeavors as well. So a little bit about me. My name is Nicole. If you don't know me, I'm a menstrual health educator who began charting my fertility in 2015. And I went public with charting in 2016, about a year after I had started. And I used the hashtag #FamTaughtMe to talk about my charting journey. And I am an artist. My background is in photography, and I started making work about menstruation, and I started writing a lot about menstruation after I started charting and really started figuring out my health through a body literacy framework, and of course through the fertility awareness method, which was the methodology that I used to understand my cycle. And so I began blogging and making guidebooks in addition to starting to teach classes and work with people one-on-one. And so I also run a small farm and an herbal apothecary. And my main focus is on preventative health, obviously, because of the pandemic. It required taking a different turn in terms of like what I was really studying in terms of herbalism, but also reproductive and sexual health, which was already the trajectory that I was kind of going down. Okay, so before we get started here, if you would like to draw with us today, you can head over to learnbodyliteracy.com/visual reader or learnbodyliteracy.com/anatomy. And either of those pages will bring you to some of the images from my book, The Body Literacy Visual Reader, and the accompanying coloring book. And that's what I'll be playing with today. So yeah, you can head over to those links. They're also in the chat if you're joining us on Google Meet. So this whole project actually started before I had applied for the grant. It had all really started with this idea that I had called Fertility Awareness Through the Five Senses, which became a short, 55-page book. And the book is about how to enter an understanding of body literacy before starting to use it for something. I sort of went into this work needing it for contraception in like a very material way. And I came to the body literacy aspects later. But if I could have, done it over again, I would have had more of like a sex education that was, gradual and something that, had been taught to me growing up. And so I wanted to make a book that essentially started with more of those types of fundamentals. And that for me began with the senses, because the senses are how we actually observe our fertility and start to become conscious of it occurring. So that is how I ended up writing Fertility Awareness Through the Five Senses. And then I had this opportunity to write a grant, and I thought, maybe people aren't as familiar with fertility awareness, but maybe if I switched to using the term menstrual health and then explained the same concepts, that I'd be able to get some funding to talk about this subject more. So that is really what started me on this idea of having these participatory sessions where we're connecting over a different sense. And so today's session is going to be about sight, because I really believe that if we don't see ourselves, we really don't understand much about what's going on, both with our fertility, but also our sexuality, and what's normal for us, what our normal functioning of our infradian menstrual rhythm is. And so I just wanted to start out by looking at some of the images that are within the visual reader, and just to talk a little bit about what's different about these images before we warm up and start to draw together. Okay, so here you have the interior reproductive system, and these images are a little bit different than what you see typically for a few reasons. The first is that the cervix is actually drawn with cervical crypts. So a lot of times when you see an image of the cervix, it's shown sort of smooth, and that's this part here. And so I chose to draw it more accurate, which is that there are these several hundred crypts within the cervix that produce cervical fluid and different types of cervical fluid. So just more of an awareness of the cervix being this thing that has a function and a purpose. And it's not just a passageway. So that is one area that's a little bit different. Another area that's different is that in the left image, the fallopian tubes, or the uterine tubes, as is the official name for them, they are drawn not actually touching the ovaries, because a lot of people think they're connected based on the types of medical illustrations that we see. So that is just another small aspect that's different, as well as depictions of the vestibular glands, which produce sexual arousal fluid, in the early stages of arousal, right at the vaginal opening. So again, just showing more of a complete picture of our interior reproductive system. And on the right, of course, the clitoris being included is huge, because a lot of the times in these interior reproductive system images, we actually don't even see the clitoris. It's actually omitted, even though it wraps around the vaginal canal and is very integrated with the whole vulva. So just some interesting things to get started, having us think about in terms of what we see. And this is just another image to kind of inspire us and get us started. It's showing us the sort of skin at the skin level, the vulva, and then also under the skin, what the interior of the vulva looks like with the clitoris present. And also some of our glands are other sexual glands that are present and a part of our sexual response. So on the left, we have the periurethral glands, which are sort of wedged between the vaginal canal and the urethral canal. And on the right, we have the vestibular glands shown. So again, just showing that the clitoris is larger than just the glands is, really important, as well as showing these other glands that make up the whole vulva. And in this image, we also have more detail of the clitoris, especially what we're looking at here. I think that's notable is the descending body of the clitoris. So a lot of times, if you read literature, it will say that the only part of the clitoris that's external is the glands. So that's this part here, just what they'll say is pea-sized. However, if you look at the veins and the nerves that vascularize and innervate the glands, it's actually several centimeters long and is underneath the clitoral hood, which is on the surface. So you actually have several centimeters here of an erogenous piece of the clitoris, what's called the descending segment of the clitoral body. So that's also interesting to note as well, that there is quite a bit larger clitoris that is there on the surface but underneath the hood. As well as the right image here, where you can kind of see the clitoris within the pelvis, and also the other glands, how they interact with the clitoris and the whole vulvar area. And this one is a cross section of the clitoris, it's very common in literature about the penis, to show basically a cross section to explain how the penis gets erect, right? It gets harder and stiffer with arousal, and the clitoris is analogous to it. So it's got the same major parts here. You've got the two main dorsal nerves, you've got veins and arteries, and you've got the corpus cavernosum, which is that erectile tissue that can actually expand and harden. And this is just another graphic showing you the difference between basically a flaccid, unaroused clitoris versus aroused clitoris, and what the differences between those are and what they look like. All right, hopefully everybody's with me so far. I think we have a few more people joining us. Another image here of the uterine cycle is just showing us the things that are happening in the ovary, the uterine lining, and the cervix during each phase. So that's just there as a comparative. And this one here showing a side view of the reproductive system, really trying to show that the colon, essentially the digestive system, the uterus, the reproductive system, and the bladder are all really, tied up against each other. And also that the clitoris is present as well as an internal structure relating to these other parts. So just kind of giving us a better image of the pelvis and, how things are arranged and how things interact with each other, even though they're different body systems. And this one goes in another, a little bit different direction as well, showing us the homology, the connections, the innervation connections between the phenotypical female and male genitals. So it's just showing us that basically the glands of the clitoris and the glands of the penis are innervated by the same thing. They're essentially, analogous to one another. So that is pretty fun to look at. And you can also see here that the cervix is triple innervated, which is a very rare thing in the body. So it just shows how important the cervix is and how much the body wants to communicate information quickly between the cervix and the brain, and even goes as far as bypassing the spinal cord with the vagus nerve. So you can kind of see how that nerve is traveling straight to the brain without meeting up with the spinal cord first. As well as this page, which is showing us the similarities between erectile structures in both endosex and intersex variations. So just showing that everybody has a foreskin. It just looks a little bit different. Everybody's got a shaft. It just looks a little bit different, is arranged a little bit differently in both, endosex and intersex variation, which is really cool to look at as well. And this page showing us uterus diversity, so that not all uterus or uteri look the same. And that is something that not a lot of people really hear about until maybe they've had an ultrasound that tells them otherwise. But I think the shapes are really these beautiful organic forms, actually. And the cervix, so just showing us a detail of the cervical crypts and how they, change function depending on the rising hormones of, estrogen or progesterone at different parts of the cycle. So again, just like really zooming in and looking up close at these parts of the body and what they do. And these are just a few other graphics showing us what's happening with the cervical crypts, how it's acting at, as this portal that opens only during times of fertility or during menstruation. And otherwise, it's pretty much plugged and blocked. The way that we know of a mucus plug during pregnancy, that mucus plug is actually forming every menstrual cycle anyway. And so that's what this graphic is kind of showing us. And so how do we use sight to observe the menstrual cycle? We use it a lot of different ways, right? It's one of the main senses that we're using in fertility awareness. So we use it to read temperature, which is important, and also graphing that temperature properly. We, of course, use sight to observe cervical fluid. So not only do we have the sensation or feeling of cervical fluid, we also pick it up, we look at it, we observe it, we make notes about it, we talk about its consistency. These are all parts of just being a person who's practicing body literacy. And then, of course, observing menstrual blood. Even people who don't practice body literacy can be known to, pay a little bit of attention to what their menstrual blood looks like. But we do live in a menstrual concealment culture where it's more common for people to sort of just wash the blood away without observing it. So we're using sight in a more active way than the average person to pay attention to what's going on with our cycle, from one cycle to the next. Okay, so I hope you are ready to draw. Does anyone have any response to looking at the anatomy? Any first kind of interpretations of what you see? Feel free to chime in and let us know how you feel about it. Yes, please.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
I'm taking down my brace, so my camera is going to be off, but I really appreciate these drawings. As a midwife, I did not learn about a lot of the little details of the anatomy, specifically the crypts. That's something that I find so amazing. So I really appreciate this, and I plan on using this in my career. Thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, the crypts are so beautiful. They're a really cool structure, and I find their organic forms to be just very interesting. And the more that I've learned about the science of the fact that there's about at least 4, but maybe more types of fluid is very interesting, and that the different crypts get activated and essentially make what looks like under a microscope very different forms. So some look very crystalline, others look more like little dots. Sometimes you'll see more stretchy lines that look like, parallel lines. So this has to do with the changing hormones and the changes that occur during the fertile window. And it's definitely one of my favorite things to talk about more. So yeah, feel free to use the images and download them as you wish. Bree.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to say that I appreciated the simplicity of these visuals and making it really easy to understand. Ultimately, the accessibility of it, I just think is really wonderful. That you can potentially talk to young people about this as well as easily as you could other folks. But I want to say I didn't know that the uteruses could be shaped so differently and had such diversity. So I really appreciated that. And I was also really curious about knowing that we all start off with similar, I guess, or, the way everything is arranged similarly when we're babies or growing in the uterus. And then seeing how that changed the language that you're using around, I think you said endo and exo, I thought was really helpful. So yeah, just wanted to add that feedback.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the images of endosex and intersex anatomy are super fascinating. I just had someone say to me yesterday that they loved, just being able to see that and look at the different parts that make up the erectile structures and the whole genital structure. It is something that is really fun to talk about. And also I hear you on trying to make them more, I guess, simplistic and accessible in certain aspects. I was concerned about, of course, making them accurate and detailed, but I did want to make this a project that young people, teenagers even, or kids could start to play with these images, in a very playful way, and just start to get more acquainted with their bodies, because even just me exploring this stuff in my 20s, it has, it's changed my relationship with my body and how I feel in my body, how I experience it. So just being able to see it and write it down and draw it. I think it's super impactful. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. For the community engagement aspect of our session here today, I encourage you to participate, of course, but it is optional. So you can just hang out if you want to. You're welcome to share your art making screen if you want to. I'm going to just do a little rearrangement of my laptop, and then I'm going to draw with you all for a few minutes, listen to some music, hang out. I appreciate, any documentation of your art making if you do decide to make art with us. And these sessions are going to be uploaded to YouTube as a part of a public art archive about menstruation and menstrual life. So we'll do a study that focuses on sight. So any way that you connect to the sense of sight through discovering and interacting and getting closer to your body. So we'll do a sight study that is a sizable time. But first, I think we're going to start with some warm-ups. So if you have your art making materials, we can take a 2-minute break or so that you can get set up. And then we will start with some basic sketches. The first sketch is just going to be 1 minute long. So it's going to be quick. And we're going to try and do a single line sketch just to get our, senses warmed up to drawing a bit. And what I mean by that is that you'll try to take the focus of your study, whatever it is that you feel like drawing, and you'll try to sketch out what you want to do for your session here today in 1 minute with a single line without raising your pencil off the paper. Okay, so we're going to start with that first, and then our 2-minute warm-up sketch is going to be right after that. Then we'll be using basic shapes. So if you're trying to draw a clitoris, for example, maybe you use 2 ovals to show the clitoral body, and then you use a long rectangle to show the descending body, and you use a small circle to show the glands. So basic shapes, just getting acquainted with the basic structure of what it is that you want to draw or paint. And then we'll do a 5-minute warm-up, which is where you'll actually have a chance to plan or experiment for your sight study design in your sketch. All right, so does that sound good to everyone? If you're still with us and you're ready, we'll start with a single line sketch. So I'm going to get myself set up here as well. Like I said, you can head over to learnbodyliteracy.com/visual reader, and you can see all of the images that are in here, or you can go to learnbodyliteracy.com/anatomy, and you'll see some of the images that are in this book. And then we'll get started with a minute. Okay, that's 1 minute. All right, so this is as far as I got in 1 minute. Let's see. I'm trying to draw some cervical crypts. Okay, hopefully that got you all warmed up. Maybe thinking about what it is that you'd like to draw or spend time on as we work together here. Okay. Now I'm going to move on. I'm going to use the same sheet of paper just because I don't want to waste. And now I'm going to try and use some basic shapes for my sketch. Just kind of see what forms my sketch is going to take shape into when I actually work on. I think I might with it today. All right, so we'll give us 2 minutes on the clock. Again, just warming up your hand. Start moving your brain, thinking about what it is that you want to be the focus of your study for today. And that could be something that you want to focus on internally, or it could just be a focus of more like design, like you're just interested in the form. That's okay too. I had an art professor once that told us to never erase. We weren't allowed to have an eraser in class. And he would just tell us to basically use our pen a little bit harder if we wanted to make a new mark. So instead of erasing, just push down harder and create new lines. And those old lines that you had will sort of fade away. Okay, I think that's 2 minutes now. Just about. Okay, so here's my shapes. Again, I'm just loosely playing with the form just to warm myself up. Okay. Hopefully everyone's doing well so far. I'm going to flip this. And now I want us to just take about 5 minutes free moment to just say, okay, is this what I want to focus on for my study today? And if not, change it. It's completely okay to switch it up as well. So you can use this time to plan or experiment for your design, whatever it is that you want to work on. I'm going to set myself up here for a little painting session, and I'm going to paint the cervical crypts for my study today. So, and maybe I'll use some pencil as well. So take your time, get set up, and whenever you're ready, you can start working on your sketch. So I just wanted to share with you some ideas that I have had for different ways that you can engage, right, with art making that has to do with body literacy or has to do with the menstrual cycle. So how can we explore our sense of sight to deepen body literacy? So a couple ways that I've seen people do it and I myself have experimented with is you can draw your own vulva. So, that's just one exercise that I think everyone should probably do. You can use a mirror, or you can use your own memory. You can use your own, imagination, and draw your vulva how you see it. There's also the cervix portrait, which was popularized by Chloe Skerlach, who runs FAM classes. And I love this project that she termed the Cervix Portrait Party. It's a wonderful project where she started teaching people how to look at their own cervixes, have their own speculums, and how to photograph them. And so they're able to make their own cervix portraits. So I love that. And I think that idea could be interpreted, into art making, painting. So you could draw, imagine, paint your own cervix. You could photograph it if you wanted to. And some other ideas are you can make imprints. So obviously there was a big discussion recently about casts of vulvas. So you could make a cast of your own vulva. But a little bit less involved process is that you can use lipstick to make an imprint of your nipples or breasts. So you can actually, like cover your breasts in lipstick and then make the imprint, and then you can draw on the imprint. So that's another way to engage with it. You can also talk about the 4 seasons of the menstrual cycle through art. So you can use metaphors and use artistic imagery in order to talk about the connection between the different phases of the menstrual cycle and the 4 seasons. And then I've seen a lot of other artists, like people who are doing work with yarn, actually making physical 3D pillows and other tools that can be actually used as, educational tools. So doing that with the vulva, showing childbirth that way through an artistic 3D medium. showing menstruation that way, and also, you know, making art about the clitoris. And then I just added this image because I was with some friends of mine a few weeks ago, and we were sitting there having this very wonderful conversation about our bodies and our lives, and we were talking a lot about menstruation because of my work. And we looked to the left, and this pillow had like split open, and my friend said, look, like, you know, there it is right there. And she's an artist as well, and my face lit up because I was like, you know, you really can see, you'll start seeing the menstrual cycle everywhere. And so, you know, you really can see the artistic forms in a lot of different fun places. So these are just some ideas. So you don't have to stick to just drawing or painting. You can actually explore the sense of sight through a lot of different ways. So now we're just going to hang out for the next 20-30 minutes. I'm going to throw on some music. You can mute the stream if you'd like to listen to your own. And I'm just going to hang out and paint for a bit. So you're all welcome to do that as well. And chime in whenever you finish something, or if you want to show us something, if you want to ask us what we think about it. I appreciate all of the engagement. That's what I'm working with today. This one here. Okay, how is everyone doing so far? I hope you enjoyed the cervical fluid playlist. Oh god, the things I do in a day. I just finished my first little painting, so I'll just share it with you all. Continue on if you're still working. So what I ended up doing here was working with this same page, which is showing you the cervical crypts close up, and basically the canal's in the center here, and then you have the crypts on either side. So it's basically cut in half. And my goal with this one was to just show that the different crypts, in terms of their different heights, that they have different purposes. So that's why I painted them some different colors so we can distinguish. Let me see. So here's a better picture of it. So what I'm trying to show here is that the upper crypts of the cervix, these ones here, they tend to have the type of fluid that facilitates sperm survival, as well as sperm transport. So they're often called the S crypts, meaning like S for sperm, because these are the ones that are going to get activated during the fertile window, especially when you get close to ovulation. So these are going to start releasing fluid that can capture good genetic material, and even, you know, play some role in selecting it. And that's actually the second one here, the yellow, which are the L crypts, which are in sort of the middle of the cervix. Let's see if I can show you a comparative image. Yeah. So you can see here a little bit in the visual reader that essentially the blue crypts are at the top. They sort of form these canals. And then the yellow, which are the L crypts, are sort of in the middle. So I drew them here in the coloring book. And the purpose of the L crypts is very interesting. It says they form a fern-like pattern under a microscope and act as a selector by trapping low-quality sperm that are malformed or dysfunctional, and doesn't allow them to continue upwards. So it's very interesting what this L mucus does. So it acts as a selector, and it can also hold sperm for later release. Basically, the fertile window starts before ovulation. The egg comes out by several days, about 5 days. And so during those days, the reason why, you know, pregnancy is possible is actually because those cervical crypts here can hold sperm for later release. So some of the little hotels that the sperm are going to be hanging out in for those days, waiting for that egg, for that perfect moment for the egg to be released, they take up shop in the L crypts in the middle of the cervix. So that's why I went with this same color-coded idea here in my drawing. And then on the bottom, I went with red to again show what is the mucus plug. So that is a different crypt of the cervix called the G crypts. So that's what you see down at the bottom there in red in this image here. And of course, it makes sense that the crypts that provide the mucus plug, that they're at the bottom, right? So basically, at the top of the vaginal canal, it gets closed, you know, shut off. It's not like the whole cervix is open and then it closes at the top where the uterus is. It actually closes right at the bottom crypts there, and it plugs off the rest of the crypts above it. So during that time, the vulva is relatively dry, usually. Or you have your own pattern of infertile fluid, which is like a sticky type of fluid that's not very wet and not stretchy as well. So when you're in your patterns of infertility, the G crypts keep fluid from, you know, being released in great amounts, because it is plugging the cervix, and of course it's protecting the uterus from harm. Just like pathogens or anything that could get inside your vaginal canal that could potentially get inside your uterus. The body sees that as a pretty big threat. And so it has this amazing system to keep pathogens out. And that's all mediated through the G mucus. And in the visual reader, it says this mucus forms a plug as part of the immune system. So you can see that it's actually made up of immune cells, the G crypts at the bottom. So not only are they a physical plug, but they're also providing immune regulation. So they're actually a part of what's, you know, keeping the vagina acidified and you know, really keeping it safe from harm. Yeah, go ahead, Bree. Do you have a question?
No, I raised my hand on accident. I was just trying to give a react because I definitely did not know that about the immune system and the relationship. So I thought that was really cool.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it's super interesting. I can send you more info on it if you're curious. In this page of the body literacy visual reader, you can see how the cervix, let's see if, hey, can you focus? There it goes. Wow, it's really fuzzy. That's weird. There it goes. So in this one, you can see that the cervical crypts are changing from starting out 5 days before ovulation, and then showing the ovulatory time, or the fertile window, and then showing 5 days after ovulation. So it opens, basically the red plug dissolves, and then cervical fluid is released in, greater amounts. And then on the other end, after ovulation is over, the mucus plug forms again and is a part of the immune system. So if you look at this stuff under a microscope, you'll see actual like lymphocytes and leukocytes in the G crypts. So you'll see like actual immune cells. They look like little dots. And that's what makes their structure so different from some of the other cervical fluid structures. And actually in the reader, I have little diagrams to show the different structures of the fluid shown under a microscope. And hopefully I'll be making more work about that soon as well. So we're at about 30 minutes now. This is going to conclude our structured time together, exploring sight, but of course feel free to continue your art making, past the class and throughout the week as well. And then we'll get to talking about touch next week, which will be our next sense. And touch is also really important for fertility awareness and body literacy, because touch is the other main component to how we make observations. Some of the other senses we still use, and those will be interesting too, to go through sight and taste and see how the class is different depending on which sense we're talking about. Sight is the most obvious one, so it's the one I wanted to start with. But touch next week, we'll also talk about the different types of cervical fluid. So I'll do a demonstration with different objects to show the different types of cervical fluid, and we'll kind of start with that, and then we'll focus on using art to talk about touch in relationship to body literacy. So that could be doing a 3D piece of art, as well as continuing to draw, or continuing whatever your medium of choice is. So before we wrap up here for the day, would anyone like to share their drawing or their study, or just what they're working on or curious about? I do want to open up the floor to see if anyone had a good experience with this exercise, and what it brought up for you, if anything.
I can go.
I would love that.
Okay. It gave me clarity because I kind of started off just drawing very intuitively. I thought a lot about the warmth of the sun. Here, when we did past 1 minute, I got into the clitoris and the different glands. I went and looked at a picture, like you had suggested, and kind of used that as a guide. Oh, sorry, my stuff's kind of blurring. Let me try to stop that. There we go. And I just started to differentiate with different colors, and then kind of connected those colors back to what started to feel like me seeing how these were all connected and working together. And then this was just sort of like an outer drawing of like the body and the fluids coming out, because I was really interested in learning more about the fluids coming out of the body and how to look at those and observe those. So that's kind of, I don't know if that all made sense, but.
Wonderful. I love each of your studies. Yeah, I like that you sort of moved around on the page and weren't afraid to start something new and like just switch it up and see, how your interests sort of guided your meditation with the art. And I really love how it came out. I like your clitoris. It looks like very organized and symmetrical.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to share You have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, I can hear you.
So this was just really cool for me, just trying to get back into learning more about myself and my body. And so I used your reference picture of like the anatomy. Um, and then I just used like color pencils and marker and kind of just made it look a little funky. I don't know if you can see. I'll send you a picture after, but
Love that.
I'm I'm prone to doodles and like abstract, just like throwing random colors at things. So that's kind of what I did.
Wonderful. That looks great. I love to just use color for these things, especially because the reproductive health area has been so coded pink that I'm just like, I need something else. So for me, drawing like anything else, any other, color combinations or just like being, creative with the color palette, I think is really needed. Pink has just been over associated with this realm of work, and not everyone necessarily identifies with that. And I'm just curious with like how you all interacted with color, and if you also ever feel those vibes about things being super color coded within reproductive health realm. But yeah, color is of interest to me in terms of what you all do with it.
Hey all. I'm actually at work, so I really couldn't do as much as I wanted to, but I'll show y'all my little drawings. You can see it. This first one is upside down,
Yeah.
but it works. And then I tried to use some of your your illustrations to draw the second one, which really helps. Yeah, and just like looking at all the parts and identifying them on myself, like thinking like, oh, I've felt this in the past in not a good way, or just stuff like that. So it was really fun and informative.
Wonderful. I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. It looks really good. I'm very happy to hear that you were able to connect it with your body, especially because that's really the point of the exercise, is to start to connect what we're seeing with what we're experiencing. So well done. Thank you so much. And also on company time, amazing. Nothing better, in my opinion. Yes. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. If anyone else wants to share their art, please, you have the floor. I'll just show you what I've done recently. These are some other studies. And the breastplate.